Hey everybody, this is Eric from the Nostalgia podcast. We wanted to take this time to unequivocally and wholeheartedly say that Black Lives Matter. This is not a conversation and this is not a debate. The following episode, which was recorded mid-May, is our first episode back after an intentional hiatus. By releasing this episode and subsequently resuming episode releases, we in no way intend to steer the general conversation away from the Black Lives Matter movement or police abolition. We uphold our stance against the white supremacist patriarchy. Through anti-racist action, introspection, and self-education, we are committed to being better. Listen to Black voices, keep attending protests, keep donating your money, keep speaking up against racist action, dismantle the system that perpetuates racist action, call out racist behavior, educate yourself, and educate your racist family. We love you, and we will continue to do our part in dismantling white supremacy. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay cute and stay critical.
Hello, and welcome to the Nostalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero. And this week we're joined by Bob.
Hello, I am Bob. Thanks so much for having me for this one.
That's it.
We are super excited to have you on this episode. Bob is from one of my favorite bands, Tilt Wheel, and he also has a fantastic podcast called I Want to Party with Bob, where he interviews some of our favorite local musicians. You guys all know now that we're musicians. You should know by now.
If you didn't know, now you know.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Bob.
Oh, I think you kind of covered most of it. I mean, I'm Bob from San Diego, drummer for Tilt Wheel for almost 28 years. I have my I Want to Party with Bob podcast where I talk to bands that I love and also talk about kind of ghosts, paranormal, horror, sci-fi, just things that I really love. And that's almost a year old. And I also have a trivia podcast, which Eric has been on with Lousy Advice, called the Great Rock and Roll Trivia Podcast. And Eric was the champion, the winner of my very first episode. So
I got an Adult Magic LP, which was sick. That was a fun episode. That was cool.
So this week we watched Dracula. We watched Dracula 1931 and Bram Stoker's 1992. Holy shit, you guys. So when you go back and you watch some of this stuff, I know we say this every week, but when you take the pop culture phenomenon that is Dracula, and it's like, oh, cool, I love Dracula. I love all the things, and actually watch these movies.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot there. I will say, I mean, I enjoyed the second more than the first. I think that might be blasphemous to a lot of cinephiles out there, because I know Dracula is one of the classics.
Yeah, it is. It is. But there's a lot more going on in the Bram Stoker's Dracula from the 90s, too.
Yeah.
There's also a lot more eye candy that's not, as far as effects go. And, in other ways, too. But, I mean, visually, the Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola Dracula, is stunning, right? In a lot of ways. The other one, the 1931 version, the effects are obviously, is that a bat or did some guy just throw like a sock through the air or something?
It's like a towel that was thrown across the screen.
A towel, right? Yeah. Like somebody's got a towel on a rope, like flapping it as it kind of goes along, like what are they? One thing, well, maybe we'll get to this in a minute, but my favorite part of the 1931 Dracula, let's get it out of the way now, is the very beginning, and I think you know what I'm going to say. The very beginning when they're looking at like the basement of Dracula's castle where he lives, where his coffin is and everything. The critters?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's like they're armadillos?
Yes.
A possum and like Jerusalem, or what are those pill bugs? Or and like
the Jerusalem cricket.
Those aren't native to Transylvania. Like what's going on here?
That little Jerusalem cricket has its own coffin. It was so
I didn't notice that.
It came out of a little coffin. And I was like, really? This is so cute.
Okay, this is what I want. I want fan fiction about that. I want to know how that happened and why that happened, and him and all his little like critter friends. That's what I want. It'll be like the Hamtaro, but meets Dracula.
I wonder why they it was kind of like, well, what kind of weird shit can we put in here? We don't have, wolves are hard to get. Yeah, let's look around the neighborhood. That's the studio lot possum they found in the trash can that morning, probably,
Probably,
something like that.
So what's weird about both of these films is they both had a budget crisis. So right off the bat, since we're talking about this real quick, and then we'll get into deep dives, but actually, no, I'm going to save this. Let's get into the first one, because that's how we'll start it off.
Yeah, cool. In the far-off land of Transylvania, London real estate agent R.M. Reinfeld finds himself selling land to Count Dracula despite warnings from the local villagers. Once the papers are signed, Dracula manipulates Reinfeld using some vampire mind control stuff, which causes his mental state to deteriorate. After crossing the sea together with hella boxes of dirt, they arrive in London, and Reinfeld is sent to the insane asylum. Dracula wastes no time and promptly makes friends with a woman named Minna and her family, who I guess was the reason he went to London?
For some reason, Dracula preys on Mina's friend Lucy first, prompting the men in her life to call Dr. Van Helsing, who informs them that they're dealing with a vampire. A bunch of stuff happens for no reason while the men are deciding what to do with the women's predicament. Then Renfield goes back to his master Dracula. He dies, Mina is saved, Van Helsing is a vampire now, and he wants to suck your blood.
Whoa.
Probably.
Whoa.
A lot of inferring at the end there.
Yes.
Okay, so since we were just talking about it real quick, I'll get this out of the way. This film had a problem with budget because guess what happened in the 1930s? The Great Depression. So they were originally going to be doing a different version of this, but they ended up deciding to do just a stage. So this is actually the stage play that they adapted this from. And there was no money at all. And Bela Lugosi only got $500 a week for this, while his counterpart, the dude that played Jonathan Harker, who was like not even in this fucking movie, got $2,000 a week. And they fucking used Bela Lugosi to make him go to Bram Stoker's wife and be like, "Oh baby, let me make this, I can make this." And then he talked her down from like $200,000 to like 60.
Whoa.
So, but like Bela Lugosi was like, this fucking film is happening, and he wasn't even their first choice for Dracula either.
No, they settled on him. They settled on him basically. They had to talk Todd Browning into letting because Bela Lugosi was playing Dracula on Broadway at the time, right? Which was hugely like successful too. They were saying, and then they gave him like $3,500 for the whole movie, which I think they said. To equate that to nowadays kind of money, it was like 50 grand or something stupid, right? Like, what kind of he wasn't very well known, but I think it seemed like Todd Browning didn't like him or something like that.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. Is this the one where the cinematographer, because I'm bleeding the two films together because there's so many similarities in a lot of ways, even like production wise kind of, but is this the one where the director was super sad because I think someone died or someone was in the hospital? Oh, somebody died. And
he wasn't really present for a lot of the movie.
So the cinematographer, he did like a lot of like the directing and everything.
The directing work, right. Todd Browning didn't even do like most of the directing work. It's like Tim Burton with Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, but it's like, he didn't do jack shit. He like drew a couple things, said, here you go, and all of a sudden, whatever. But I was reading, Jessica, the same thing about how shitty Bela Lugosi got treated during the filming. And he was the one that really is what made that whole franchise turn into what it turned into, right? His image as Dracula is how most people know Dracula, more or less.
And like even his cadence and the way that he speaks and everything too.
His mannerisms, his acting for the part, sure.
It's just wild too, because Bela Lugosi is such a staple in horror, right? Like you think of Bela Lugosi as such like sort of this idealistic horror god to some respects. So for him to be just sort of like the plucky third or fourth choice to these directors and be like, whatever, just give him a meal voucher and just fucking, I don't care. Like, oh, okay.
Give him a pittance. let him into the canteen at the studio a couple times a week, and he'll be good. He's a foreigner. That was the other thing too. I remember reading something about him being looked down on for his nationality as well.
Because I have a lot to say about how this film treats foreigners. And I think the vampires were, at least my read of it, is the vampire aspect of it was a metaphor for a fear of like other cultures, like xenophobia type of thing.
Sure, a little xenophobic, sure.
And then they also, they prey on innocent white men, right? That are coming just trying to help. And
white women as well. And white children
and
as well.
And they're going to take your children yeah, and they can manipulate people just by looking at them with their words and with stories. And there's also this weird thing about not being able to raise above what they are. Like they have to, even though they leave, they have to sleep in their soil and they have to bring it with them wherever they go. Like, I don't know, there's a lot to this that read just really xenophobic and really fucking racist.
I've never made that correlation before, but you make some great points. That's the soil. And also, I'm thinking right when you started saying that, who are the victims in 1931's Dracula? Well, it's Lucy. And then also there's like a baby, right? And in one of the first scenes when Dracula brings the baby to the brides, that's taken from the book as well. But how much xenophobic thoughts were in that when Bram Stoker, who was Irish, was writing about it from, say people from Eastern Europe coming into Great Britain or Ireland or whatever. That bears a further look, I believe, to me.
Well, and then, because when you get into that too, like, so he buys a house in the neighborhood and then everything goes to hell. And then vampires are like, or Dracula is going after their deepest desires, like their children, their women. Like, what are the things that, as a white person, you can find the most threatening, like to you?
Sure,
and it's your property, your air, like the people around you, right? And he even, like with Renfield and stuff like that, he takes advantage of him. So we're supposed to think like, because also like trying to look at this through like a 1930s lens, like what is this saying and what would I take away from this? Or not, maybe not me, but like, what would somebody like take away from this in the 1930s, right? So this really trusting, really kind of upbeat dude goes to Transylvania and is going to meet the guy at like midnight. You know what? It's kind of weird, but it's okay because I'm here to help. So the way that he's framed too is he's a victim. He's like,
an innocent victim as well, right? That which is when he's more of actually like the witting accomplice in some ways in reality, it seems like. I mean, Dracula takes advantage of him, but through, well, maybe I'm looking at it through a different lens as far as like the book and all that. He comes under Dracula's sway, but he's a very enthusiastic member of Dracula's posse, it seems like to me in some ways too.
Oh, 1,000%.
We're in agreement about that. Yeah. But so when he shows up, he's like, "Oh, say, Mr. Dracula, pleased to meet you. How are you?" Or whatever. So it's like, oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he also wants his money too, because that's the other thing, right? He's kind of a snake oil salesman, like, or at least like for me, I'm like, this will, and like the locals are like, hey, you don't want to do this, and he's like, oh no, it's fine, right? So like also not respecting culture and not like listening to obvious warning signs or anything. Just got to make the sale, got to do it, Crazy.
That's American raise yourself up by the bootstraps kind of mentality. Let's get right in. Oh, vampire, I'm not scared of you. Let's do business. Oh, come on, like really.
It's just like that blatant disregard for warning signs just because of your general ignorance of other cultures or your general ignorance of like a cultural landscape to some degree under the guise of greed.
Yeah. Also, I'm safe. Sure. I'm fine. Nothing is going to happen to me. Everything is cool, So like being naive also plays into that too, right? And then like Renfield also like one of the lines that I really liked from him was madmen have strength, I think is one of the lines he said. But like throughout everything, he's trying to be like, oh no, I'm strong. I got this. It's fine. But also like he was so tortured with himself. Like this one had so much more of him, but I don't know what it was trying to say about him because like he was so poorly written and the way that he was treated by like the mental health workers, like that also was fucked. Like everything was fucked about him and his character.
Yeah, it's hard to say, especially just in the terms of like addressing sort of the disregard for mental health in that way, where it's like, I mean, back then, again, with many many of the themes that we're going to discuss are sort of like, for that time, folks were way more dismissive of anything that wasn't like white or American. It was just like disrespectful of other people, of bodies, of folks who weren't men, essentially, right? So it's they go at it with no nuance. It's just like loony bin, blah blah blah, you know, which is silly. I got a lot of gay vibes from Reinfeld and Dracula. I mean, obviously, I have a lot more to say about sexuality and sort of like the queerness of character in the second one, because in this one, again, there was so little dialogue. Like a lot of it was just like moody landscapes and like him sort of wandering, and you're getting you're getting set
and it was
work
really choppy too.
It was really choppy.
Oh wait, what's happening now?
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like it was strung together very well.
No, but even in this story, I got small moments, especially when Reinfeld first shows up and they're having that like initial meeting and at the dinner table, and he's kind of introducing himself, and he's like, "Oh, I'll be ready to go tomorrow. I only have 3 boxes or whatever." Like that whole thing, I got this total vibe of like, I mean, Reinfeld was sort of presenting himself in a way that seemed a little bit more feminine than expected. That might have just been in general optimistic character mannerisms of like him wanting to make the sale, of him wanting to do this. Like it could have been that. It could have been just that sort of fronted thing. But then watching the second one, I was like, well, I feel like there's more of a, not a relationship, but more of like a teasing homoeroticism in the way that like Dracula would look. And I mean, again, that's just character mannerisms, but
like a sensuality almost between Dracula and Renfield, kind of?
Yeah, 100%. Because then even after that, like, just the fact that he became sort of his, like, sidekick, he was sort of a doting servant in a way that felt more than just, like, I mean, obviously he was under a spell, but
there's like an abuser and abused relationship between the two in some ways. For me, is what I see. And that carries through like the book and both movies we're talking about and other Dracula related movies and shows and whatever. That's kind of a common theme. They always seem to hold the Renfield character. They keep him to task. They keep him in that same role that he's in almost everything in some ways. And I totally understand what you're saying, Eric, as far as there is something a little bit kind of homoerotic between the two, but it's like, it's a kind of a abusee situation is the way I feel. But it's almost, there's like sexual tension between them in some ways too, which in the 1930s, you know, they're going to present that in a kind of a very quiet way, not stated way, obviously. But I think you're right. There's something there. When you said that, I love talking about this because you both have viewpoints of it that make little switches kind of click off in my head. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Well, and to further that point too, like when you think about it, who does Dracula attack? Like he only attacks women. Like he will bait men, right? But like Renfield,
it's like to get them out of the picture or something like that in some ways,
or to like further. So he's like promising, like you can be with me at some point. Like you can be with me. Yeah. Like it's fine.
Oh, there you go.
So
he's
like
just kind of a little bit of a tease in some ways or something.
Yeah. And then he's like, just give me something. Give me anything. You're going to give me something. Right. And so in that way, he's taking this power over them. And it's,
he was the original queer baited character. And it's like, I'm not like, we might kiss later. Maybe. I don't know. Do you know? We might. Hold on. Let me
stick
just
around and find out.
Yeah, right.
Just
Yeah. But you're totally right about like the abusive relationship sort of. It's almost like this prominent manipulative gaslighting almost of Dracula that just like convincing him to do these things. Obviously, it's under mind control, but it's taking somebody who was hopeful and wanting the best or expecting the best out of an unknown situation, going into this deal and then being totally taken over. And again, now Reinfeld's life is over essentially because of this.
Right. Completely. Yeah. Completely. You don't bounce back from eating flies and spiders very quickly in any kind of situation. I don't think so. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But that's that level of like abusive control that Dracula has over him too.
Yeah. So in this one, I didn't understand, why does he want Mina? And why the fuck does he go all the way to all these like great lengths to fucking get Mina?
Right. In the 1931 version,
Yeah.
it doesn't even say, it doesn't really clarify anything about that at all, right?
Yeah.
Right. Also, Betty Davis was considered for that role, side note, but Universal didn't think she was hot enough for it.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Oops.
Like, some executive was just like,
Yeah.
oh, she's not hot enough. What the fuck? She also doesn't have any fucking lines. Like, she's not a person in this. Like, this whole thing is about xenophobia and about controlling women and owning them. And it's not even about controlling. It's about ownership. Who gets to have them, and they don't make any decisions for themselves. There's the scene where it's like 5 dudes in a room, and Mina's like, okay, I'll go to bed. And they're all
like,
just
Mina,
talking
you
about
should go
what
to
the fuck
bed
do
now.
with her.
Like,
Well, what's wild too is just comparing, like, because I know previously we've done like the Wolfman and the Mummy. So if we're comparing like classic monsters, that's sort of the overarching theme of all those traditional monster movies is like male control over women.
Well, and the thing too is he obviously owns Dracula owns his 3 wives, right? He controls them, and we see that just with him doing the waving of the hand, right? So why does he want them? And then why does he like go in any iteration? I don't understand why he goes for Lucy. But all of the women just exist to be exploited, to be victims, and to be gaslit by men.
Yeah.
And like at the very end, Mina isn't saved by the dudes. She's saved because the sun comes up.
Yeah.
So the dudes don't even save her at the very end. Like they're just there to be in peril, to give the dudes something to do. Like they have no agency.
no, really.
at all.
None other than to stand there and be attacked or to be victimized, more or less. That's kind of the only role there is. To be manipulated, controlled, and ultimately victimized. And then cast aside and like, oh, okay, now I got you now. Okay, well, yeah, I don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's speaking also about like sexual assault and all of that, which we absolutely need to talk about with this. I wanted to talk about the way that Mina talks about the attack, how she says it's like a dream and everything is foggy, and like she can only remember a few details, and she'll never forget the eyes, and she was weak, and she felt like the life was taken out of her. That is 1,000% sexual assault.
Yeah.
1,000%. And she was hiding the evidence because she felt shame. It was hard to talk about, you know? And then like her dude was just kind of dismissing everything. But what I did really like was her dad was at least very like, yes, talk to somebody. Yes, whatever we need to do, like this is going to happen. Like at no point was her dad or like the doctor being like, no, this didn't happen. Her husband was the one that was like, well, that didn't happen. Let's just think happy thoughts. Okay. Let's just think happy thoughts. It's fine. And it was just like, but like there's also something to like the vampires too, with like to talk about like cyclical violence.
Oh yeah, the idea of like vampirism in the way that it is perceived is like you get bit, then you're a vampire, you live forever, and then sort of you have to feed, so you have to inflict violence on others, right? Like that as a cycle, and just like the reiterative notion that it exists through the ages, that it continues to exist. Yeah, I think that's super interesting, just as far as the vampiric trope of what the character is and what vampires are and do in society, and also just specifically tying the violence itself and making it a pseudo-sexual act, like the whole neck thing, and oftentimes too what really, like, I guess I haven't really thought about it until now, the sexualization of that act of violence itself. Oftentimes when somebody is bit, specifically a woman is bit by a man, they're almost acting in this like orgasmic way. So the performance, which was wild,
right.
The performance of that violent act is supposed to be sexy or hot, or the idea of like being a sub or being like whatever, or being victimized is like hot, which is this weird thing that I noticed today that I'm like, why the fuck is that a part of the vampire story? Why is like being sexually attacked hot? I don't understand why that's been written in as the trope for all these vampire characters.
Well, and then when they like accept it, then suddenly they're cool and they're sexy and they like, you know, and people want them and stuff.
Yes.
And what does it mean to say? It's something like, the night is the only time I feel alive. And it's always at night. And it's always like, you know.
Well, I have a lot to say with that on the next one. I mean, it's not in this, more so in the next one.
The next one. Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah,
well, just the idea of deviancy as sort of like the untouchable, like something that you can't get, or like the nighttime and like like anything that isn't straight white heteronormative digestible is bad in that way. It's sort of like all of this becomes deviant. So like embracing the evil and just being like, yes, I want to die. You're like, what is this? Like, okay, like, come on, y'all. This is a lot.
One thing I want to say, when you think about it and kind of put it in the terms that, as far as what you guys have been saying over the last couple of minutes about vampirism and sexuality, in a lot of ways, that's like a rape analogy in a lot of, wouldn't you say? The old kind of the ultimate rape analogy, but they're presenting it in a way where it's like, oh, but see, it's okay. The victim enjoys it. Well, yeah, but they fucking die. I mean, and or turn into a vampire. So, I mean, it's all like shitty. It's all like, God damn it.
But it's wild.
Like, no, it's none of this is good. That's not good.
They're only traumatized if they remember the attack, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where,
and going back to you saying, like,
right?
They're foggy. Oh, it's foggy. I just remember eyes, and doubting the victim's statements and like, oh my God, like, yeah, this is all fucking rape. Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
It's just wild that as a genre, that idea is the romanticized aspect of it. They've taken rape and romanticized it to the point where it is one of the most notable tropes of any sort of generic vampiric thing. Like, that is it. Like,
Anne Rice built a career on this basic, all these tenets. Like, Anne Rice, you built a career based on sexual assault. I mean, come on. Like, my God.
It is wild.
Not to laugh about it, not to sit here, sexual assault. No. It's hilarious. I mean, to put a lighter note on it, I guess, in some ways. Like, good fucking Lord. When you're looking at it from the outside, it's like, oh, it's so obvious when you, like, really start to think about it,
Well, and look at how many people have made a career off of that, right? Like, that is what Bela Lugosi is known for. Like, I will always 1000% remember him as both Dracula and that Bauhaus song. Like, that is what is etched in my mind
Bela
forever.
Lugosi is dead. Yeah.
And then
then
there's also, like, people that build their whole lives around this aesthetic, and that, like, then there's, like, the Twilight thing. And Twilight is one of the fucking grossest things ever.
Yeah.
And I have read it because I was kind of forced to by people that I worked with, and it sucked and it's horrible, and I can talk about that all fucking day.
Twilight. Oh boy, I never saw any single. I read almost every Anne Rice book up to.
Did you?
Oh my God, I can't remember. I stopped reading her books sometime like in the mid '90s. I would look into Anne Rice a little bit more now that you guys have given me a lot of things that I actually want to look a little bit more into, and Anne Rice is one of those things, because there were some issues about her, like in the late 90s, kind of when I stopped reading, and it was like, oh, good, I stopped reading for a good reason. Okay, good. All right. Self-validation kind of thing,
Well, and that also goes back to something that we talk about a lot on this, which is when you go back and actually watch things, like not just for like, oh, cool, this is on, like chill, like The Incredibles.
For me and you guys, it was Mary Poppins. You guys ruined Mary Poppins.
Oh yeah,
for the rest of my life. But in a good way. No, but in a good way, because I was like, yeah, man, fuck that movie. That's bullshit.
Yeah,
these people like fuck that banker, man. Give him his penny back right now.
That's
like,
literally how I feel every time we do an episode. Or for the most part, afterwards, I'm like, man, fuck all of these people. Fuck this whole story.
Right?
Fuck that kid. Fuck his parents. Like, oh my God. Like, you really start to see some weird cyclical tropey, like, because again, all of these stories are just written by people, and oftentimes they're flawed, and oftentimes they're men, which under a patriarchy, it's a lot of sort of blindness to like sort of misogynistic tropes, and especially in this, like,
well, but there's like also too when there's like such a strong female character, or what you think is a strong female character, then really going back and like actually diving in and being like, it's a lot of this, and what we do is like having the courage to go back and look at things and be like, and like really not just seeing it for the cultural icon that it is, right? But like, what is this actually saying, and what is this normalizing, and is this character actually somebody, or are they just nothing, And in this film in particular, like, the only notes that I really had on Dracula were like xenophobia, right? Everybody is afraid this is what's going to happen if foreigners start moving into your space.
Yeah.
And then for the women, right? Because they don't have any lines. Like, looking at any of the characters.
Bare minimum, yeah.
None of the characters had any depth to them. Yeah. And it was just so choppy and so all over the place. I had to like stop a couple times to be like, what the fuck is happening? How did we get here? Who the fuck is this, right? And this was just like, out of all of the older films that we've watched for this podcast so far, this was like worse than Wolfman in terms of, at least the Wolfman had like a story, you know, like this one is just kind of went boop, 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 boop.
Because of how choppy it was.
Water. Boop, boop, boop.
The narrative structure was so all over the place that it nearly didn't exist. Like there had to be so much supposition throughout it. Like you had to like, okay, I guess they're on a boat now. Okay. They had to talk about that. That's fine. Why is he at the opera? Okay. Now he's at the opera. Okay. That's fine.
Right? Like,
and he's just walking into the opera. Yeah. It was like it's like Reinfeld looking up the stairs being wild because he's like under his spell. And all of a sudden Dracula's at the opera. We're like, okay, so you're supposing that the boat docked. Where's Reinfeld? Who knows? Then there's the opera. And then we go to the asylum and then we see him and he's like, where's Dracula? And so it's like, you're really having to tie, like, I like movies that aren't so expositive where it's like, and who's that character? Well, that character is this, that, who did this and this, that. Like, I like when it doesn't do that, but this had none of it. Like, give me something.
Oh, nothing. Yeah,
like,
nothing.
Give me at least something to go off of. Give me a starting point to tell your story because I'm really lost. Like, this isn't great.
I think it was big. This movie was really touted as one of the most frightening movies ever made at the time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they were just going more for kind of like a lot of modern day movies where it's all CG bullshit, like Transformers or something, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, where the fuck's the story? There's no story. These are like fake robots running around breaking shit. Okay, great, excellent. I think it was the same way with the 1931 Dracula was they cut it. They're like, oh no, just make it so that it's scary and shit. Like they would talk about people in the movie theaters that were passing out. They were talking about that in newspapers and reviews saying, you'll be so frightened to see Dracula, you'll pass out, you know, just saying it was like a pure fright fest. So they're like, oh, fuck the story. Let's just make these yokels scared. Because back then, you know, you listen to Little Orphan Annie on the radio and you'd be lucky to see a movie every couple months or something like that. So
I mean, and truly,
maybe that has something to do.
Movies, right?
Yeah, I mean,
right?
To some degree, yeah. There was a lot of like gorgeous stuff, like the set when Reinfeld first gets to the castle and you see Dracula walking down the stairs in the background.
Beautiful. Yes.
It's gorgeous. And you're like, oh wow,
beautiful.
this set is awesome. Like, I love this. Again,
the details, the cobwebs. It's really gnarly, right? It's really cool.
I did love a couple of like it's a big budget film to some degree, but again, it being such a low budget in a way that other films weren't. Like some of the takes were just like, oh, that was not the right take. You guys should have done that. Because like when Reinfeld passes out and then the women come in like with their long trains and he like shushes them away. One of the girls is because they have to back up in a diagonal to get away from the train so they don't trip. And I was like, oh, that's smart. But one of the girls is walking too fast and then like runs into the other girl and she has to like tap her on the hip to be like, hey, like, you're coming, but like, come on. And then they go out of frame and I was like, yes, that was the wrong take. I love that. Oh my God. And then just some of the props too, like you said, it would be like a spider and it's like a spider with a clear string just being pulled up a wall. And you're like, oh,
right. You're like,
okay.
like, okay.
Or it's like this bat that's just hanging in the window for like 30 seconds too long.
Which
state of the art special effects in 1931, I guess.
Truly, which
I don't know.
To some degree, I'm like, those parts I enjoyed the most. It was sort of like
it's campy, it's funny,
it's
like
campy,
wow, like wow.
It's like
without meaning to be really, you know.
It's low budget and bad, but it's like The Room in that same way where it's like this is bad, but I'm really liking this, like you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the last thing that I really had to talk about with this was mostly men's reactions to, again, kind of that like pack mentality, right? So like Dracula is taken in by the men that surround Mina and Lucy. And all of the dudes, once like Van Helsing is like, aha, it is a vampire. Everybody's like, No, it's not Dracula. It can't be him. I know him. We hang out. It's not Dracula. It's cool. Even though he's creepy, even though he's hanging out with Mina too much. Clearly there's something wrong, but because they know him, quote unquote, they are like, no, it can't be him. Because by knowing him, they're implicating themselves.
There's that sort of, not necessarily plausible deniability, but there's just sort of like a kinship in folks to some degree who look like you, to where you identify with them. So if you can't see yourself doing it, how could you see them doing it? It's like,
yes.
Well, that's my friend. They would never do something like that. But there's especially in this with the men, it's sort of like, well, he's a stand-up.
It's a boys club kind of thing. It's like a boys club kind of thing. Yeah.
He's a stand-up fellow. He would never do that. And it's like, you don't know him.
That's my bro. No. Yeah, he can. No.
We got a beer earlier. I met him earlier. He's cool.
Because then they have to question themselves, right?
Yeah.
Which, like, also another really interesting thing about vampires is they can't see themselves in their reflection, right? So they can actually never look back at themselves. They can't see themselves in the mirror and see the things that they've done. They're literally incapable of that self-reflection, whether you want to say that's because of like demonic powers or whatever. But like, they're actually monsters. And I think that's one of the most telling things about being a vampire. And there's this really great line, this is the one I wanted to read from Renfield, which is, to me, why all of those men were doing that. God will not damn a lunatic soul. He knows the power of evil is too great for those of us with weak minds. So going back to like our Wolfman discussion, right? Where it's like the anti-Semitism and all this other stuff, like, oh, well, I'm just going with the flow. Like, I'm just doing this out of like survival or out of whatever, but it's not me. Don't worry. I'm going to be forgiven for this. Like, I'm not going to be held accountable for these actions. Whereas like Renfield, he still has those moments of awareness, right? And all of the victims do. For Renfield, it's, you need to get Mina out of here. You need to save her. You need to do this, right? Because I can't be responsible for what happens. Like, I can't do this. But he still does it anyway, right? So he's still capable of that reflection and of that self-awareness, whereas the vampire never will be.
Yeah. That's such an interesting take, just the physical idea of being able to self-reflect. Like, that's right. So, I guess I'd never thought about that as a generalized idea apart from just it being a trope of the character. That's so sick. Because there's this general idea of like, yes, they carry within themselves autonomy, but there isn't sort of self-reflection in the sense that you can recognize wrongdoing in hindsight. Like, you're never going to be able to see yourself doing these things physically in any sort of reflective way or from the perspective of somebody else. So that's so crazy. That's so cool.
And they're never going to be able to change, right?
You can't have any personal regrets, right? If you can't self-reflect and think about what you're doing, more or less. So yeah, that's pretty intense. That's gnarly.
I love that.
I never thought about that. Yeah, that's brilliant.
I wonder if that has anything to do, okay, so oftentimes I expect and suspect that a lot of people who've written media in the past were not as considerate, or just didn't really, it was just like, oh, this is just an interesting thing that I threw in. I wonder if that has anything to do with the trope of the vampiric character as of like Dracula or of vampires itself. Because that is just that seems so obvious, but I've literally never thought about that.
Well, and it might be that this story is so cool. Played out that we just know, the more that you are exposed to something, the more normalized this is, the less that you challenge that, which is why we go back and look at this stuff, right? To see what this actually means. And so with that being a trope, it's like, what makes a vampire a vampire? These 10 things or whatever. So there's this list of this is what makes
a list. There's totally a list. Yeah.
So we've begun to look at things, especially with like folk tales and stuff like that, as more of a like, which box does this fit in? Not what does this mean in the context of that character or of that box? You know what I mean?
What do their characteristics say about them as people, as characters, as beings? Oh, that's so cool. Just a complete lack of cognizance for oneself as an idea of like not owning action. That's so sick.
And that makes sense for vampires because they are just completely not able of change ever. The only thing that will change them is death.
That's sick.
Is there anything else anybody wanted to say about this one, or are we good to go to the next one?
I didn't have much to say about it. It was kind of the second time I saw it, I was like, I watched it twice in the last 2 weeks. I was like, oh, this movie's really fucking boring. Like, oh my God. I can't sit through it again.
Yeah.
I can't do. I was going to try. I watched the other one 3 times though, because there was enough shit for me to go, that's fucked up. Like, why, kind of things like that.
Isn't it so wild that like some people hold on to this as like, this is it, and they build their whole aesthetic and their whole life around something like this movie or like the classic Hollywood movies and stuff like that. But when you go back and look at it, there's no substance and there's no story.
No, none. Like literally none, pretty much. Yeah.
And when people do that, like, I'm not sure when the last time that they went back and actually watched this was.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, it must have been
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it was probably great back then because there were no other movies. So
100% right. There was nothing else really like that, as gnarly as that movie.
Yeah.
So yeah. One thing I did want to say about it, though, it was something I read about the film at the very end when Dracula's dying. They cut like, I don't know, 10 or 20 seconds of his death screams out because they thought it would be too gnarly for audiences to hear it or something like that, right?
Yeah, there was supposed to be a whole epilogue that got cut because they didn't want the Christians to be unhappy and be able to kind of accept this. Yeah, I think I'm good. I think we can put this vampire to bed.
We can put a nail in its coffin.
Drive a stake through the heart.
Boom, we all got one.
And then we're going to cut the head off of the next one. Let's do this.
There you go.
In the far-off land of Transylvania, London real estate agent Jonathan Harker finds himself selling land to the lavish and creepy Count Dracula. Once the papers are signed, Jonathan is given to Dracula's brides to bite and to bone an unholy whatever for I don't know how long. After crossing the sea with hella boxes of dirt, Dracula arrives in London and immediately creeps on John's soon-to-be wife Mina and her promiscuous friend Lucy. And by creeps on, I mean stalks and sexually assaults both of them.
Anyway, motivated by love or some shit, Dracula manipulates Mina into falling in love with him. Van Helsing shows up, and so does a letter from John, who's escaped the sex dungeon, and asks Mina to meet him in Transylvania and get married so she'll be saved. She complies, they go back to London, then back to Transylvania. Mina kills Dracula, Mina is saved, and Van Helsing still has a vampire
boner. Because he wants to be a vampire, kinda.
Oh my god.
We'll get into that. All this shit. So, where the fuck do we begin with this one?
I don't know.
Well, you could begin with the title just by calling it Dracula with a lot of female breasts would be one direction.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like
an
Lucy...
excessive amount.
Yeah.
I don't know why we didn't see Winona Ryder nude in this movie, because everybody else was, pretty much, Like, my God. Like, really? Like, here we go. The vampire sensuality, rapey, like, oh, fuck this movie, man. I had some issues with that for sure.
I feel like Lucy's character, on her resume that she sent in with her headshot, she also was requested to include a shot of her left boob, because I think that was maybe covered up for about maybe 2 minutes in the movie. I don't know.
Yeah,
it was real bad. On that fun note, let's talk about those sexy Dracula brides who
oh my gosh,
agreed. So the women on this movie were treated like shit, y'all. So this isn't so bad, or this one isn't so bad, but it's just kind of funny because nobody wanted to ask the brides to take off their clothes, even though they agreed to it beforehand. So Coppola tried to make his son do it because, spoiler alert, he sacked the entire special effects department. The entire fucking department, because they spent all of their money on the costumes and the sets for this. Mostly the costumes, because they're the crowning jewel of this. For more practical effects. So all of those effects were practical. Nothing was CG except for the blue fire. But
that was one of the selling points for the movie too, is like these are all practical, like, fantastic,
And you know
incredible
who did all
effects
that?
and this and that.
His fucking son. His son who is into magic. He was like, hey, you want to go? Because they were broke. Like, they had, like, no money. So he's like, cool. Kid, you're gonna do this. You're like, I know you're into magic, make it work. And so his kid was on set with him. The three brides had agreed to like be naked in their contract and stuff like that. And none of the fucking people on set could bring themselves to go ask them to take off their clothes. And his son was like, I can't, and then he went and made somebody else do it. But like, nobody wanted to go up and ask these, like, they are super cool filming this, like, erotic blood orgy that's happening. But to ask somebody to do that, like, why would you put that in the fucking script if you are uncomfortable asking somebody to do this?
Well, also, that should be a contractual thing. That should be in the, because if there is any sort of nudity to be, it was?
Yes.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay.
But they were uncomfortable asking these women to do something that they had agreed to do.
See,
so
that's
why are you comfortable filming this if you, like...
Yeah, because then that adds a certain layer of tension just in the room, right? If like, well, I don't know if I don't ask... Like, they were cast, they're contractually, they're getting paid, because like, if you're naked on film, you get paid a higher rate. Like, it's part of the contract, it's part of the thing, so... What a really little bizarre little boy thing to do. Like,
bizarre.
Also, it's nothing to be ashamed of. If you're gonna do it, cool, do it. If you wrote this into your film, great, awesome. And like, a big way that this was written was to be like the sexy vampire movie. Like, he wanted to lean into that super, super hard, right? But to be nervous about asking people to do that was really weird to me. Also, like, on set, this was reported by like one of the extras in the scene. Coppola shouted whore and slut at Winona Ryder when filming a scene to try to get her, like, elicit the emotion that he wanted from her, which is gross. And then there's another scene where Gary Oldman, like, when she first sees Dracula in London or whatever, where she, again, wasn't getting the reaction that they wanted. So he grabbed, like, a cucumber or something, and when she turned around, he had it like it was his dick hanging out, and she was just like, and they're like, great, that's it, awesome, cool. Like, and then he also had them, like, film an actual top-to-bottom wedding by a sanctioned fucking priest, right? So Keanu and Winona were actually married because they made them go through the entire fucking thing, right? And they only showed that ending thing where they're making out. That's it. So this whole thing was supposed to be a love letter to Dracula and to vampires and to all of this stuff, because they took a lot from, like, Nosferatu. They took a lot from the original source material. They took a lot from 1931 through all these little great things, but they didn't have a lot of substance around it. They were like, I want this to be authentic. Why? Also, what the fuck are you doing? So I have a lot of issues about this film, and then finding out all of this stuff behind it, I was like, this all 1000% tracks, and I fucking hate this movie even more now. Spoiler, I hate this movie so much.
Well, to go off of this being sold as like a sexy sexual thing, I want to talk about what I was trying to get into the first time as far as like the queering of sexuality in this one. Just like most films, for the most part, that all exist, if ever there's like a gay character depicted, they're never supposed to be depicted as having like anything good, or gay acts are always depicted as bad. So in this movie, like when Minna and Lucy are in the garden, they're sort of being manipulated. That's when they kiss. So like a gay kiss is like evil. And then there was the scene with Gary Oldman and Keanu Reeves when he's shaving. Like, that was the homoerotic scene. Cause like he's shaving and then he goes up like right next to him and he like touches his neck and he's like, maybe you shouldn't shave. Like, it's actually pretty dangerous. And then he like licks the knife and then goes back and like touches his back. And I'm like, yeah. So like, it's the reiterative idea that like gay is deviant. It's sort of, it's the deviancy.
It reinforces that the viewpoint that any kind of gay or queer sex is like deviant behavior and like forbidden, like, oh, like, no, hold on,
like,
so
him sort of like being homoerotic with Keanu Reeves in that moment was like, ooh, it's supposed to be scary. And he's like, I don't want this. You're scary. And like, no, but I can control you. Like that idea of sort of the manipulative male gay person who is like a pervert and a deviant and all that. And then next to that is like the gay orgy of like all the ladies like kissing and all this stuff. It's like scary and hellish and bad and gross. Like,
and erotic. Right?
It's like
it turns you on a little bit, but it's like meant to be a little bit disgusting and a little bit like forbidden fruit.
Yeah,
sure.
Immoral,
in a big way, I would say almost that it's forbidden fruit. Yeah.
It's like immoral and not normal, sort of. It's so also tying it to the sort of xenophobic aspects of this from Van Helsing, from his perspective, and like the Londoners or even like the Texan, those guys, the idea that like this person carries with them all of this sexual deviancy that includes like homosexuality or any sort of queering of sexual acts or sexual relations just sort of adds to this idea of normality as like sex is just man and woman, sex is just this, you know what I mean? And monogamous, yeah. So that was definitely something that I was like, oh, okay, well, we're doing this. Every like gay thing is a negative in this.
Sure, and also like look at Keanu Reeves' character. It's almost like with the razor licking scene and all that, it's like, oh, well, wait, he didn't start gay, but look, maybe he is now. You know, it's almost presented in that way, like, oh, you know, that gay man turned him gay in this. Well, how did that happen? Right?
Because he's so flamboyant and so like, you know, kind of like
over the top kind of or something like that. But also, no, I mean, your main point being, it's presented in such a negative way. Yeah. And I got that too. I totally got that from that scene. Like, oh, like he's manipulating this poor person into being attracted to him or something like that in some way. And it's all bad, you know, and it's okay.
Even to your point about like them being like, oh, because when Keanu ends up coming back and they're having that conversation about like, well, you didn't ingest anything, right? Like you're fine. And he's like, no, I didn't. And they're like, okay, are you sure? Because like, if he gave you anything, then like you got to make sure. And then it's just like, no, I'm fine. They're like, okay, well then you're good. It's sort of like, did you suck his dick? Like what? Like, oh, what are you? What is happening right now? Like, what are you getting at? And I know it has to do with like the idea of being transformed or like, but it's also just again treating if that were a sexual assault of any kind. It felt like they were more worried about the queer aspect as opposed to the violent aspect of what that would have been if it had been that thing. Specifically between Dracula and
no, that's a great point. Yeah.
Well, and again, like now Dracula in this one hasn't just gone after Renfield, right? Like he went after Jonathan too. But again, like he very specifically just baits people and only goes after women. Like, cause we full on see him like wolf boning down on vapor boning down on some people, right? But he won't do that with Renfield. He won't do that with Jonathan because it's like beneath him or I don't know. I'm not sure what that is, or he's not going to give into that.
It feels like it goes back to the sort of misogynistic ownership of men owning women. Like, well, men can't own men, so that doesn't make sense why he would go after them. Men are, big air quotes, more powerful than women, so he should only prey on women because that makes sense, right? So in a male-dominated story, it really feels like that's just off limits. And again, it just reiterates the misogyny of the idea of preying on women as being that. You know what I mean?
Sure, well, as that like being the whole, like the weaker sex kind of thing. In some ways.
It reiterates that weird trope, and then it also just sort of reinstills a sort of bizarre validity, like they're trying to exemplify why it's okay in a really disgusting way. It felt so convoluted and gross, and again, it just goes back to the vampiric lore of it all. But this movie definitely didn't do anything to change or sway the grossness of what the story entails.
No, I think if anything, it just reinforced so many horrible fucking tropes that we see. And gaslighting is totally cool and totally normal. And it's like, it's not like Stockholm syndrome, right? But it's like loving your abuser, you know, and then just suddenly like, oh, well, but this is exciting to be abused and everything. I don't want John because he's vanilla. Yeah. I want somebody that's going to hit me. Like, this is just another thing that's trying to reinforce the fact that women are supposed to want to be dominated and want to be abused and treated like shit, and they find that hot. Like, we're supposed to find that attractive. Like, what the fuck?
That's so toxic. Also, you said Stockholm Syndrome. Did you guys know that isn't real?
No.
Stockholm
really?
Syndrome? Yes. So,
going back to like the Patty Hearst thing and all that, where loving your captors more.
Yeah, where it was developed, it was actually a fun story about how men make up shit women say.
Yes.
So it was a bank heist in Sweden, and the cops really flubbed the shit out of like making sure that the hostages got out alive when the captors were like treating them okay. Generally, they just wanted the money. And after the fact, because the main captor, she came out and she's like, no, they were actually good to us. The cops mishandled it. The cops were the one who risked our lives. They're the ones who put us in danger. The media spun it to make it like, no, she actually is under this pretense, this assumption she's in love with her captor. It's fake. We handled it great. Yeah. She's sick in the head.
She's been
now.
manipulated.
She's been
manipulated about it. Yeah,
so again, it's like spinning the words of something that a woman says for the gain of the male, and to sort of glorify how the man handled it in that situation. I just thought it was like it makes sense for the context of the story in that same way. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? That's so crazy. People suck so bad.
Oh man, they really do. So okay. We've only like scratched the surface. What do you guys want to get into first? Because I have notes on everything.
There's a depth to the shallowness of this movie for sure. Yeah. So there is definitely.
Well, do you guys want to talk about Lucy?
I do. Okay, I want to talk about. Go ahead. You brought her up, so I'll add to that.
I was just gonna say she was, I think, my favorite character just because she carried within her this autonomy, this lack of shame, this lack of she rejected everything the men expected of her and was like, no, I'm gonna be me. And you're like, hell yeah. Like at the beginning, the scene where like Minna's reading that book about sex, she's like, no, just show me, like, let's talk about it. Like, I want to talk about sex. Why can't I talk about sex? Why is it bad? It's not shameful.
I did it last night.
That book is not about sex. That was Arabian Nights. And that is about Islamic folk heroes and stuff like that. So this is exotification of cultures. And also interesting that because Dracula's whole thing is that he was fighting Islam, right? And then that took everything away from him. So Lucy, like, this is another way that they're trying to pin her as being a dangerous or bad character because this is her book and this is what she's subscribing to.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, they're trying to portray her as an other immediately by siding with what is supposed to be sort of the villainous or the downfall of our main character.
And they're doing that by just showing like a sexy picture. I thought it was a Kama Sutra book, but no, it's Arabian Nights. That book is like not about sex. I mean, there might be some in
not
there,
at all.
But, like,
oh, look, she's the downfall of our hero, or our even though he's the bad guy, he's actually the hero of the story in a lot of ways too.
And then it makes sense why he attacks her, right? Or like if we're setting this up because he's always been against Islam, and that was the whole reason that his love was killed, and the whole thing that sent him on this quest is fucking Christianity. Right. And then Lucy embraces this, and so I still don't understand why Lucy even exists, because like she just exists to be a victim. But like I was glad at least in this telling of it that they make her, like you were saying, Eric, she's strong. She's like owning her sexuality. Like, yeah, I do this, whatever. Yeah, I boned him, did this. Like, the way that they're trying to frame that character is a lot of like slut shaming kind of is. And then later on too. And I think that's also the reason why they wrote her that way was then later on when she's just boning down on that sweet, sweet werewolf dick, right? Or whatever, right? She's like, if you just take after when Mina saves her, right? And she's talking to her, what does she say? She says like something like, I don't remember it all, it's all so foggy. It's this. She's clearly in turmoil, right? But then the way that she's treated is just, it's almost like she's asking for it. Because she was so promiscuous and because of this and because of that. Like, it's not.
They framed it that way. And to add on to that point, I think the intention there is like they're depicting this woman with autonomy, with power, with strength, without this hindrance of sexual shame or this hindrance of, well, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm a woman. She doesn't give a shit. She's like, who cares? Like, whatever. I'm going to do whatever I want. That's great. But she's there to reiterate and instill within this male story that is not good. You will die. Right. It's not a good thing to be that. If you're a woman, you shouldn't have these things. You shouldn't have autonomy. You shouldn't be promiscuous. You should have one guy or whatever. And then just,
I wanted her to have like a throuple or something with people. Like she has all these dudes and they were all like very yes and okay, fine, you're getting married. I still got you. But they were so bent on demonizing her promiscuity. It was just so sad because then at the end, like we just see her own this, but then she has a baby. Like, fucking, this is what she wants. She wants a baby. Like,
She was my favorite character apart from everything that they did to her. Because really, like, that first scene was so funny. Just like, the first guy comes in and she's like, oh my God, watch this. And she just like walks over. She's like, I'm going to flirt the hell out of this guy. Walks over. She's like, wow, it's so big. Can I hold it? And she pulls out his sword. And then he's like, he's taken by it because he's like, oh my God, this gorgeous woman. Then the other guy comes in and she's like, hold that thought. New person. And then the third guy, she's like, okay, you guys hang here. I'm going to go. And then the fourth person, she's like, here, come hang out with us. I was like, yeah, dude, you're sick. She was the coolest. She was my favorite.
And I love that the dudes were just kind of like, yes, and cool. This is fine. You know, whatever. Because they weren't ever at each other's throats in the same way that women would be if those tables were turned. But yeah, also she was supposed to be like the projection of what Mina wanted to be, I feel, or how confident she wanted to be, what she wanted to inhabit, because John was vanilla. John was fucking boring. John had nothing going for him. I love Keanu Reeves, but goddamn, there was nothing there. And
the worst English accent I've ever heard in my entire life was. Other than my English accent, but
so
my
bad.
God.
So bad.
Mr. Dracula. Like, no. Just play it straight, dude. You should have just played it straight. Same with Winona Ryder in my case. Like, I'm sorry. It's like, no, don't make her do an English accent too. She sounds terrible.
Honestly,
anyway,
I loved how bad, like, just because oftentimes people say, like, Keanu Reeves is a bad actor. Sure. He's done great roles, but I love seeing him when he's so bad. It just it warms my heart. Seeing him in that room and then, Gary Oldman's doing this amazing character bit, like, hitting all of his beats, like, he's emotional. And then it cuts to Keanu, he's like, but what? There's a,
totally.
What? Wait, what, man? And you're like, is he here? Like, what is this guy doing?
Well, and honestly, I love that if he was going to play that, like, I love that he did it in this film and that he did it as John, because John is the most fucking boring character. Like, even if you look at those lines, right? Like, his whole thing is like, sweetie, I'm going to go and I'm going to do some business right now. And then when I get back, we'll get married. Right. And then he's like taken over by these sex demons. Right. And so then he can't find his way out because they drain the life out of him and suck him dry and keep him there. And, so he doesn't have the strength to move because he works so hard. And then he gets to the nuns that save him and he's like, come to me and marry me. And the whole time, he's so vanilla that it worked so well. And I understood why Mina was like, yo, what's going on, Dracula? Cause he's actually super kind. He thinks about her. He tries, he
dotes on her, pays attention to her in a lot of ways, I guess would be one way of saying it. But are you tying in the whole reincarnation factor in there too when you're thinking about it from that perspective?
Which is also really interesting because fucking Catholics don't believe in reincarnation. So what the fuck? What the fuck?
Right.
This whole movie should not have happened. This should not have been a thing.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope. Well, they're Orthodox, but same thing. What they would have been Orthodox, right? But who gives a shit? Neither way, they don't believe in reincarnation. So that's where I'm going to get this out of the way real quick. Yes. My biggest problem with this movie, other than kind of the gratuitousness and the treating women as objects throughout the whole movie and treating women shittily, is the fact that it's the love story. I hope you guys didn't like it. I was not. The love story factor was like, no.
It's
Dracula's
not a love
the
story.
Devil. He's evil. Yeah. He's not source material aside, whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. You want to take it in a different direction. That's totally cool. I mean, that's happened a million times with a million other movies.
Yeah.
Where they detract from the source material. But in this case, I was like, this guy like eats fucking children for a living. You don't make a love story about something like that, right? I don't know. That's what kind of got me, where I was like, oh fuck, I don't know. That's where it lost me.
That's the worst part, because they're toting this quote unquote romance, this love story, big air quotes love story.
Right?
Yeah, but it's really just a story of ownership, right?
It is. That's the point.
And that's why it's so fucked up, is because he feels like he has ownership over her because they had loved each other in a previous life. And she's kind of like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And then
until he says she's a prince, and she's like, come here, daddy. Come here.
Yeah.
Totally.
But
also, fuck my soon-to-be husband, whatever, it's fine. And then even after she's married, she's like, yes, take me, daddy, give me something, because this vanilla motherfucker isn't giving, I don't feel anything with him.
So true.
But at least I feel something, even if it's like just shitty, even if it's bad. Like, so I agree. All of this sucks. The whole thing is bad, and it's all manipulation stuff, but I also get like, y'all, these fuckers are boring. And the other thing too that they establish about her is she doesn't feel attractive. She doesn't feel like she can get anybody. She is so conditioned to be the vanilla housewife, or the vanilla school teacher, where that's why she
like, she's convinced
Lucy
herself
around.
That's what she wants, but that's not what she really wants. Yeah.
But it sucks, because then they're like, oh, but Dracula is what you want, and this is what you want. It's like, no, bitch, there's other things. There's other people in this world. You can just go out there and get it. You can get that shit, Winona Ryder. Like, I believe in you,
But it just also sucks that, like, that's how they painted her, and that's what we're expected to be like, oh, this is like the damsel, quote unquote, for the story. This is the hero to some degree. So, like, the expectation from sort of an audience surrogate perspective is all women should be this way, because we're seeing the opposite, the antithesis of that persona, of those sort of character traits with Lucy. And how did that end for her? She got killed.
Right.
So, from an audience perspective,
first she tried to kill a baby, and then she got killed. Right. Like,
right.
All the bad was put on her in some ways. Yeah.
So, as an audience, we're being told through this story that women should have low self-esteem. They should not be sexually free. They should not feel any sort of autonomy. They shouldn't be all of these negative things, because the man's going to come in and be able to tell them what to do.
And meanwhile,
and
men are allowed to have that.
Essentially.
Men are allowed to have that, because Dracula got 3 other wives, and then they were bitching at him, so he here, have a baby. Right? He literally said, here, have a baby, shut up. And then he went after Mina. But before he hooked up with Mina, he went out with Lucy, right? He took her. He took everything that she had. And then she's still supposed to be cool with that. And when she even confronts him, she's like, she did the like stupid Romeo and Juliet thing where she's like, oh God, you did this to somebody I love, but I love you. And I'm like, why? Like, how can you be okay with this? And then like John comes back and is like, sorry, I fucked a bunch of girls. Yeah. And she's like, oh, it's fine. And the whole time she's thinking about Dracula. And so like, I think that has to do more with manipulation. Like with a lot of those types of gaslighting tactics where it's like, nobody will ever love you like I love you. Nobody is going to be there for you like I can be there for you. I'm nothing without you. Just these really gross tactics, which I have lots of experience with. And it's really funny because in high school, I played Mina Harker in a play. And I don't think I was in a lot of it. But yeah, so Mina, like I feel for her, and I feel really bad because I don't know how much of it was, because it's presented as her choice, but I don't know how much of it was that whole like gaslighting and like fake Stockholm syndrome and like thrall and like, even when it's presented as her choice, because we see so many times like he kind of inhabits her, like suddenly she's Storm at the end, right? And she does the thing and like, but that was him, right? So how much of what she was doing and what she was feeling and experiencing was actually her? I don't know. Because this movie was real fucking messy with all of that. It didn't want to tell anything.
Oh, God, it was. Yeah.
and
about
not
the
just
ending?
bloody.
Are we at a point where we can talk about the ending yet, do you think?
Oh, yeah, we can. I have like 5 pages of notes on this shit. We can talk about ending, and then we can go back, and then we can do a thing. Like, because I still want to talk about some of that Dracula shit. Let's talk about the ending, though.
What the fuck was that? The ending. I mean, literally. Oh, my God.
Oh, I love this. So this surprised the fuck out of me. The best thing about the ending, I think, the whole thing, the whole chain of events was stupid, was dumb. Everything about it was sucking, but, no pun intended. At the end, I liked that Mina got to save herself, right? So like she went in and she got to stake him and she got to cut off his head, right?
Right. And that was good, actually, when she's like, no, you guys stay the fuck away. I'm going to go handle this. It was like, oh, good. Finally, they give the character some true strength in some ways, right? I mean, otherwise, she's like, oh, I'm at the mercy of all these idiots, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, hold on. I'm going to go take care of shit. You fools stay the fuck out here. Later. And then, boom, she handles business. But at the same time... But I also
don't like what that was saying either, because... So, let's give some credit to George Lucas for coming up with that ending. Thank you, George Lucas, for not having...
He did?
He did. So it was going to be like the original ending in the book. So this is like the one thing that wasn't authentic that they didn't take from it. And I liked that a lot better.
However, Lucas and Coppola were buddies. They were good buddies from
They were
film
buds.
school
They still
way
are.
back,
They got wineries up here, whatever.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
So what I don't know, I don't know if it's clear what's happening in that because she kills like her love or whatever and all of that. But is that saying that the release, like as a survivor, as all of that, right? Is that saying that the only release you can get from torment can be given to you by your abuser?
Right.
Like, so is that what that's saying? Or is it saying like, cause also he was redeemed at the end, which I fucking hated, right? Or like, you know, just at least for like a minute or
well, then
like,
of course George Lucas wrote it because he was thinking about Anakin Skywalker the whole fucking time he was talking about it, right? Like, we'll make this evil character and then I'll redeem him at the very end. Like, oh, that's every fucking Lucas story ever written. That's another subject in and of itself. So I'm sorry.
Oh, for sure.
There has to be redemption or it's not a story. You know, like, oh, George.
I mean,
you just go roll around in your billions and shut the fuck up at this point.
The man has to be redeemed, okay? The man, you know, he can't rest until he's redeemed. It's okay.
You're right, yes.
But also, what is this saying about cyclical violence, too? So, again, like, the only sort of relief or the only way to truly be free of this sort of influence is by destroying the person, and that's with more violence, you know? So there's not a good way to deal with this.
Yeah.
It's reiterating this idea of, I guess, ownership in the sense that it's like the only way out is to end somebody else's thing, whether it's autonomy, whether it's their life. Like, you have to destroy something in order to gain. Like, the only way to succeed is through the destruction of others.
Right. It would almost go back on the two wrongs don't make a right kind of thing, but that's the only way out of a situation like this is by committing an act of violence, which in essence should be a wrong type of behavior in a way.
Yeah, and then also to give fucking Dracula of all people like a redemption and make him the victim in all of this.
And that was the thing, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's the whole theme through this whole goddamn movie is he's a victim. Fuck no, he's not a victim at all, right? Like, he's a slave to his behavior because he was so in love with Mina, or whatever her name was at the beginning of the movie. That's why he's it blamed her almost for the whole fucking thing. And it's
blamed
like,
her and God.
No. Like,
her
you can't
and God,
blame.
My God couldn't let this happen. My God.
Yeah.
Like, fuck
right.
this.
Like, oh my. Well, obviously it was the lady's fault. It's like, oh no, no.
And
fuck this
then-
movie. I'm getting pissed now a little bit. I'm like, this is some bullshit in this movie, right? Like,
let's get into the thing that pisses me off the most is when Dracula has already like laid his metaphorical claws into Mina, right? He like becomes vapor and goes into her bed and is like vapor fucking her, right? And she's like orgasming on the thing and she's like and then he shows up in her bed like he's like, oh no, I can't do this to you. Like he gets all the way there, right? And he's like, I can't do this. And she's like, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And she and it's like
motherfucker, you did not just do that, right?
5 minutes of like him having to be like, no, I'm here, I can't do this. And like, I have crossed oceans of time for you, right? All of this stuff. Like this fucker has waited like 500 years for her or whatever.
Oh, that's not an ocean of time. An ocean of time is 30 million fucking years, okay? Ask the dinosaurs about oceans of time because 200 years ain't shit. Okay, come on.
But it's also
Dracula always feeling sorry for himself, playing the victim. He sounds like a goddamn conservative to me. All right?
Yeah.
Let's fuck
He's
him,
like,
put on your MAGA hat, Dracula, and fly the fuck out of here right now. So
it's true. Like he really has these levels about him that feel very like incel and shitty. Like, I waited 1,000 years for you and you owe me this. Like, what the fuck? I don't know you.
Like, no, I don't know you shit.
Why did you wait for me? You don't know me and I don't know you.
Not mine.
Yeah, that was your choice. Own your choices. And that goes back to the reflection thing, because there's that whole scene when he gets to London and sees her, and then he's like, the papers just levitating, that whole thing. So it's like he can't recognize or take ownership for personal action because of the lack of self-reflection, literal lack of self-reflection, which I still love that idea just as a character trait and as sort of this intrinsic failing of what and who this person is.
Let me go back real quick, though, about the incel comment and say, essentially, Dracula does live in his mother's basement. So, I wish I had a little bing right there.
You're not wrong.
Essentially, he does.
Yeah.
I love everything about this. I love
pretty much it.
No, that was, you got to give all credit to Eric for that, for the whole incel thing to begin with.
This.
So,
it is
I
so
feel
like,
okay, I feel like for all of the stories that we like, a good amount of them, I'm like, oh, this fucking incel boy. But I'm like, okay, I don't want to say this for everything. I'm gonna play this out. But really though,
but it's true. It's
right.
It's that super silly male thing of. Again, I think it just goes back to the whole Batman syndrome of like, you'll never understand my plight. You'll never understand the struggles that I've been through. It's like,
I was married
Queen,
once. She
everyone's
died and
got
she was
struggles.
fortunate.
What are you talking about? Like, everyone goes through shit. You're not like inherently, generally, sure, you're unique in some regard, but generally, no, you're not really that unique. We all go through trauma. We all have all kinds of shit. And so blaming your lack of sexual endeavor, blaming your lack of sexual experience on other people because you think it's their fault that they're not fucking you, like, go away. It's again going back to this reiterative lack of ownership of oneself. It's not owning any action and just blaming everything on the world, essentially.
Oh, sure.
It's so silly. Like, it's so silly.
I have a whole new outlook on vampires from here on out. Like, it's just
Okay, yeah, can we just keep talking about, just for a minute, like, acknowledge all of the creepy things that Dracula did, how he was, like, spying on her and Lucy, and then decided to make it rain to have his own private wet t-shirt contest while they make out?
Oh,
like,
my. Oh, yeah.
Like, that's a great use of your power. Like, that's exactly what an incel boy would do. Right? And then,
it's like a fucking Florida vampire, right? Like, make it rain so we have a t-shirt contest over here.
Yeah.
Like, hey, ladies, come here. Like, hey, it's the Tallahassee Dracula. Like, oh, fuck. Yeah, pretty much.
No, it was
but that's a great point. That was a great point.
That scene was just so weird, too. Just because what would... I mean, it was essentially like him trying to communicate to her that he's coming, right? Like, there's the oceans and the waves. Like, he's traveling to her. He's on his way. Like, I want you to be ready for me when I get there. So get sexy and like all this stuff. It was this weird, I'm on my way. So be ready for me when I get there.
And I still don't understand that once he's there and once he has her. So because obviously he's taken other wives, obviously he's taken other women before and baited men and everything. So he can't fucking keep it in his pants now that the person that he crossed oceans of time for is right here. He's at her doorstep. Hold up. I'm going to go fuck your best friend. And then when he gets caught by Mina, he's like, don't look at me, right? Like, if you really do love somebody and if you are committed to this idea, like, I wouldn't be off boning all of these other people, maybe like in like the 400 years that we're not around, right? Around each other. But when you are here and when I am at your doorstep, I'm not going to be with anybody else. You will be the person that I'm with. And so for him to just not even just go after a random person, but to go after Lucy.
Her best friend, yeah.
Her best friend, because like he's trying to be close to her and have the mind control thing, right? And all that other stuff. So maybe it's like partially also so he can know more about her. And the more that I think about it, the more fucking disgusting it is. I can't. Like I can't with any of that.
And thematically, it just reinstills the idea that men are allowed to be promiscuous sexually, but women are not. In a very simple way, it takes away still that ownership, because if Minna's not supposed to be fucking that other guy, so he's torturing that man, right? So he's going to come over here. You're only mine and mine only, but whatever I didn't love them. I love you. Okay, sure. Great.
Sure.
What does that mean? It's just reinstilling the male promiscuity.
I'm a man. I can do what I want. But you, no. You wait for me. Even though I just screwed and I'm killing your best friend. But
also, let's go watch a porno.
Oceans of time, so that makes it okay. Blah, blah.
Yeah.
Did you guys get that too? When they went, he's like, oh, let's go to the cinema, and they watch a porn? Like, or it's like...
Yeah, he takes her to a porn. He takes her to see porn.
And then when he finally has her in bed,
he's like breaking her down. He's like trying to break her down and manipulate her into a position of total subservience to his abuse. Essentially is what it ends up being, right? I mean, I know, good call. Again, I caught that, but I didn't really put that into the picture, because the picture of Slimeball Dracula that's coming out right now, he's really slimy and really shitty. You took your love of all time
on a first date to go see a porn
on the first date? You fucking... I think Dracula really is Florida man at this point. I'm sorry. I'm not to generalize, but Jesus Christ.
To further that point that we were talking about with the last one, when it goes to talking about the sexuality of vampires, right? So when we look at the scene with Mina and Dracula, and he asks her, right? And she's like, just take me, daddy. Take me, Prince. Because she never calls him Dracula. She calls him Prince. She never fucking calls him his name, which is super important, I think. Because what would an incel boy want? Call me Prince, baby. But anyways, as she's like begging for it, right? That's when his my note is his boner teeth grow in, right? So his boner teeth grow in, and then he penetrates the neck, and then he makes Mina pet his wolf. Like, just all this like weird shit.
Like symbolism, definitely some just weird symbolism going on there for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
And there is so much to be learned from beasts. Right? Oh my God! So I'm going to call vampire teeth boner teeth from now on, because whenever they get horny for their...
That's good. Actually, that's another good thing I'm coming away with.
Everything written by men is written about their dicks. That's all. Everything is a metaphor for a penis. That's always the case.
Oh, yeah.
It's like... Yeah. Everything has to be some sort of penetrative tool, and you're like, y'all, okay, let's stop. Like, I did want to say a really couple fun and funny things that I thought were fantastic in this movie, like the moments when Dracula is in the background in like a doorway, and he just gets like cuckoo clock rocketed through the threshold of the door with like purple lights, and he's like, whoa, like when that orgy's happening on the bed, he just like, whoo, and then just like looms over them.
Right.
It's like that skateboard effect where they're on the, like he's on the wheels, he's not walking, he's levitating. And I was just like, that is so, it's like these small moments of cinematic silliness that I was like, yeah, that's sick. I love that. And then when he's like crawling on the wall too, like a little, like crawling out the window, and he just like looks at him like a cat. And he's like, and he's like scurries away. I was like, this is so silly. I loved it. Also, the wig budget was so sick. Those wigs, that initial wig when they get there and he's in the red and it's like the white little puffy like braid thing going on. Oh my God.
Did you read anything about the wigs or about the stylist?
No, you were talking about the budget. I didn't do any research. I just noted visually.
Went all to the aesthetic of the characters. So like there was this wig person that studied Japanese geishas and stuff, like how hair has to be perfect and in its perfect place, and it took hours to build these wigs. And Gary Oldman actually had to shave like the front part of his head for like the old Dracula look. But yeah, like tirelessly fucking flawless on that. And then all of the costumes, right? It did win the Oscar for best costumes, but like,
tracks,
which
like,
super tracks, because
that
like
totally makes sense.
It wasn't just one dress. It was like all of these, like all like everything was just dripping with, it was just so beautiful and so gorgeous. But something super interesting to note, which furthers the point that women exist in the story to be controlled and aren't allowed to make any decisions for themselves, is the gowns that Mina wears, or like her previous incarnation, are green. Because again, everything is choices, especially when you have that much of a fucking budget for something, right?
Oh yeah.
But they're green, which is the color of lust, love, and sexual desire. So even in the costuming, they are being sexualized. So all of that was all just to make them more sexual.
Wow.
No, yeah, on a subconscious level, I know a lot of movies do that, especially with sort of just general symbolism in its way. This movie came out in 92, right? So it is a relatively old movie, but it's just interesting that like even during that process of crafting the narrative, if you're crafting the look of the characters and what they're wearing, and sort of like reinstilling within this narrative that Minna is just a symbol of sexual desire. She's a sexual object, essentially. Like, so by painting that and making the choice to make the color green and reinstilling that sort of color symbolism, you're just furthering this idea that she is, again, like you were saying, an object to be controlled within the narrative and not an autonomous person. Like, we hope that she would. And even in that final moment, again, at the end, when she does take it upon herself to have this moment of release when she kills him, they still paint like they take away that small power and give him that small moment of levity and redemption, not redemption, but like, yeah. So even like it just, every choice in this just reinstills the fact that women should not be trusted, which is wild. I mean, not wild. It's expected under a patriarchy and all that stuff, but it just, it blows my mind that kind of stuff, it just remains to be seen when critiquing all of these movies. And most of them, I feel like the one thing that we talk about every time is the controlling of women. Like every movie we've done thus far, in some regard, the female characters that we see are only there so that the men have something to play with. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, fuck y'all.
Like, what the
Come
fuck?
on, come on. What is happening?
Well,
even in the very, very final scene, yes, Mina had something to do with the redemption of Dracula. The very, very, very final scene is the painting on the ceiling of him essentially like over and above her, right?
Yes.
And it's like, she just saved your ass. And she's the true hero in some ways, I would say. But now symbolically, you're прicing him more important than you to the whole story, when really, in some ways, she was more crucial to the story than anyone, because she was the key to his final redemption. Blah, blah, blah. Anakin Skywalker has redemption. The Anakin Skywalker bullshit. That was my whole problem with the ending, really, in a lot of ways was fading to that painting. Like, no, don't focus on this asshole. Make it Mina at this point. And of course, that's not what it's all about from the filmmaker or anybody's point of view.
And that's why, like, women need to be in these fucking writing rooms, because, like, when you think about it, like, even in right. like, you know, the 1931 version and everything, right? So many times, even in the fucking play I was in, right? Mina was just there as an object, as a trophy. And so they never get to inhabit their life, really. They're just kind of responding to or going along with whatever the men in the story suggest, right? And it just, it sucks. Sure. And I understand so much more of the problem, I think, with how women are treated a lot in just normal life is has to do with this kind of stuff. And I know, like, people will say, like, you know, oh, whatever, like, that has nothing to do with how I treat people. But it really does. When you're looking at these things and you're saying, this is the end all be all of films, and you're not looking at the relationships or how people in them are treating them, like, cool. Like, if that is how you felt like 10 years ago, great. If you don't feel like that anymore, it's also okay to be like, damn, I had no idea, like, that this is how this is. And then you see that, like, your heroes and these people that you've looked up to, or these characters that you've looked up to, like Bill Murray in a lot of these films and all this other stuff, like Mr. Incredible, right? They're actually really fucking shitty to women, and they're really shitty to everybody in their fucking, in their fucking world, right? So of course Dracula is no different. We haven't even gotten into fucking Van Helsing, and I wanted to talk about Van Helsing because he talks about vampirism as a disease of the blood, as an STI that comes from Venus to infect the, like, basically to infect the Christian penis.
Oh, right. Yes. Right?
Yes. And civilization and syphilization, like syphilis.
Yeah, he makes that joke. It's so silly.
And they're like, right? Like, and it's just a bunch of fucking men in the room, right? Yeah. And the whole time, he's like, don't trust your eyes or ears or anything. But then he gets super handsy with Mina. And at the end, like, he, like, you know, time. Mina is a vampire now, and she's like, you know, because vampires are sexy and want to, like, whatever. And he just fucking goes for it when she goes in to make out.
Right away.
He's fucking ready for it. Yeah. You know?
I hate vampires, except for you. I like you. You know, like, no. Yeah. That part bummed me out, too. I was like, what the fuck? Hold on.
And then he tries to hump the Texan. I don't understand how, like, I mean, he's written to be like, oh, don't take him seriously or whatever. But still, like, the heroes in this story, the anti-heroes in this story, the comic relief in this story are all super shitty to women and each other, and they don't give a shit. Why? This is I'm getting too far down this rabbit hole. But y'all, we need to have better stories, and we need to have better people in these rooms and creating better story. Because if you want to make a story about Dracula, or if you want to make a story about Mina, why not give them some fucking agency? Why not, instead of trying to make everybody a fucking victim, why not actually make them have to sit with their goddamn choices? Because nobody else has the luxury of not reaping the benefits or consequences of their choices.
And honestly, to your point about, like, just having more diverse writers in a room to sort of ask questions and be like, well, what does that mean in context? Like, if there would have been a sort of a female identified person in that room to look at that painting on the ceiling at the end and be like, don't you think that being the closing sequence takes away all of her agency in this moment of power that completely erases everything that she was? And this is our closing shot. Going back to what you were saying. So it's like, even that small moment, like, end it with just the death and then that's it. But by panning up and we're seeing this moment of togetherness where it's implying that he was right. It's implying that all of his actions were justified, and it's
right. And also, that it was all justified. You're right. 100% right. Yeah.
Maybe his death was actually still his choice because he had control over her and made her do all this stuff. So maybe he needed the validation of being killed by his lover, and he made her do it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so
it was his choice. Yeah.
So it was still his choice at the end. What the fuck choice did she have?
Yeah. Have somebody there to question that. Like, just, hey, like, before we shoot this, just a quick pass, or even in the editing room, just be like, hey, just saw it. What do you guys think if we leave that part out? Because I got that she has no agency and like all this stuff. What if? What do you think? Huh? Well, maybe. Is that a wrong choice? What do you guys think? It's bad storytelling because again, like somebody say something. Like, what are we doing? Yeah, have more voices, have more people in the mix instead of just like white men who think that what their thing is genius and you can't mess with this idea or this visionary thing. It's like, no, you're just a person with shitty ideals. You're not a visionary. Fuck off. Like, let somebody else posit a question. Let somebody else, like, honestly, if your shit's so good, shoot some holes in that boat, see if it sinks. If it sinks, build a better boat. Like, what the fuck? Like, let people in question your content. And if it's a mess, get some other hands on it. Like, that's how you tell a better story. Like,
but
you don't just submit the first draft. Oh yeah, that would be so. And also, it's a lot of like ego shit. I'm assuming Coppola didn't want more people on it, so I'm assuming it was like, well, this is my thing, and it's like, yeah, well, your thing.
His
sucks.
vision for Dracula, vampire, blah blah blah. Yeah, sure.
Just maybe like let's release some of that stigma. Just say like, oh fuck, I fucked this up. This sucks, dude. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
why
okay
does
if
it
it's
have
bad?
to be like a whole fucking press statement? Just say like, shit, I fucked up. Did not see that coming. I'll do better. Like,
because in a patriarchal state, men are never wrong.
Let's also talk about.
Boom, boom, boom.
I want to talk about two things that I really liked, and then let's end on the mental illness thing. Unless other people. Okay. Two things I really loved. Bringing it back to the music.
Oh yeah.
One, so the scream of Dracula that we hear in the beginning is actually the singer from the Cramps. Did you all know that?
What?
They brought Lux in to do
Lux
that
Interior?
scream. Buck, yes, they did. How fucking
Dude,
cool.
that's
wow.
sick.
So that's dope.
Imagine if he was in that movie.
Oh my god!
Like,
him
imagine
and Tom
if...
Waits. Tom Waits fucking killed it.
I know.
Like, he's so good. I loved him. I loved him.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
That's,
I would.
yes.
I would love that. Oh.
But yeah, Tom Waits was in this movie, and Tom Waits is amazing just in general.
Yep.
And in this role, he fucking delivered. He was a great Renfield, and he really did a good job of like inhabiting that character in a way the 1931 guy did not do.
Yes,
he did.
Truly.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like, let's talk about that area where he was at, which is really fucked. They're in the sewer is where the insane asylum is, it looks like, and the guards have cages over their head because like none of the rest of their body is like I feel like that was more symbolic than actually thought of. What do you guys think that was? Because that like
I think it was symbolic and also making it a little bit outlandish. Like, oh, look how people were weird back in the 1890s or whatever it was. You know, like, whoa, in insane asylums they had to wear chicken cages on their heads for some reason. Like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, symbolically it made sense. It's just as far as like to reiterate and deliver this dichotomous place, this scene, right? Like, their heads are level, their heads are square, right? So these level-headed guards versus the insane people. So to further wedge the dichotomy of having your head on right or having your head on straight versus the wildness of being mentally ill in this space. Maybe that there's
really
something
cool.
there, just the visualization of that.
Yeah.
But also, I just think it looked cool. Like, I loved
cool.
how wild
it did look cool. Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I thought those were the patients at first. That's why I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah.
Like, so that's why I think that it wasn't, or at least like if it was just on the patients, I've been like, whatever. But the patients are just like shackled and stuff. And it was, okay, like it was such a weird choice throughout this entire movie. There was like, like these like weird moaning, like torturing sounds, like from the very beginning. And I was like, how does Keanu Reeves not fucking hear that? Right. Like, and then like it just kind of carried throughout the whole thing. So like, is that just everybody in this time period is miserable? Is this also like each one of these fucking people is mentally ill? Like everybody that thinks they're okay is not, you know, and they're just used to being in this state of misery and this is normal. I don't know. But it was really jarring. There was a couple points I was like, this is still happening? Okay.
So that was Dracula 1931 and Bram Stoker's Dracula 1992.
So we'll start with Eric.
Yes.
For 1931, who do you think that this was for?
I think it was for xenophobic Christians. I think it was for xenophobic Christians.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's the end. I don't have any sort of follow-up. I just think that's who it was for.
What about you, Bob? Who do you think was the target audience for this?
The target audience for the Dracula movie was absolutely like farmers, your rubes, like, oh my, the people that get scared when the lights were out and that was it. Like, oh dear Lord, the devil's going to come inside and get us, that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Because there was no fucking depth to that. If they're trying to scare people with the goddamn armadillos at the beginning of the movie, that's not made for people with half an ounce of intelligence. So, made for the Trump voter. I mean, the rubes of the day.
True. Fact.
31. Yeah.
Jess, what do you think
about that statement?
Yeah, I stand by both of those. I think that this was 1,000% for. I think it was for men. I think it was for men that just want to control women and feel like a big man hero because they can save them and they'll only marry and cast someone that's hot enough.
True. Yeah.
What did we think? Did you like it, Eric?
No. Visually, some of it was fun. Visually, some of it was gorgeous. The story was terrible. The structural visual narrative was terrible. Yeah, I honestly, half of it, I was just like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. So no, I did not like it. I didn't like it. No, I didn't like it.
What about you, Bob?
I used to like that movie a lot until I forced myself to watch it multiple times. Recently, not a very great movie. I mean, from the effects to the characters and the kind of weak portrayals and the story and the stories I have issues with it. The set design was beautiful. I think, like you were saying, Eric, there were times when the set design was absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. Overall, if I had to rate the movie on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd give it like probably a 2 or 3, I would say.
Yeah.
Very low score. I don't really care to see it again. I love Bela Lugosi, though. I do have to admit that. And I loved parts of his portrayal of Dracula, but it's campy and it's kind of funny in some ways.
And it's the iconic Dracula.
Yeah. I don't need to see the movie again for another 10 years at least, I would say.
Yeah. What about you, Jess?
I think, so on our like it, love it, gotta have it, I'm going to say that this is below all of those and it's a taster. Like it's when you're like, oh, I don't know what that tastes like. So you get like the little disposable spoon or whatever. I did not like it at all. And this didn't have, to me, like certain parts were charming. Like we're talking about like the little bat thing. I appreciate the iconic look of this, right? Yeah. And like the pop culture icon and inspiration that this was for so many other things moving forward, and I understand that it was important for all of that, but I don't need to watch this again. And the only time I could see myself watching this is if like I'm at a Halloween party and it's on in the background on mute, like it would be a great like background just chilling. But yeah, it was just really messy in a way that I will go back and watch something. I would be more inclined to go back and watch the original Mummy than I would this.
Same. Yeah, 100% same.
How about the 1992 version, Eric? Is this new, interesting, or the same, progressive, regressive? Has the story evolved?
It's essentially the same story. The only evolution in any capacity is better costumes, I wouldn't say better sets necessarily. It was essentially the same thing. It was just as silly in what it was trying to say. I don't necessarily think it was reductive. I think it had the same level of reduced scope from the beginning to now. Just more blood. It was the same thing, just more blood.
What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I if you ask me the same question, was this an improvement over the 1931 version? I would say no. To me, it's almost like, was episode 1 of Star Wars a better movie than episode 4? It should have been in some ways, right? Yeah. But no, they just took the original idea essentially and threw more bullshit on top of it. Yeah. And they threw in, of course I'm referencing Star Wars, and I always have to go back to the George Lucas redemption thing. And they had to throw the fucking redemption, and they had to throw the love story in, and they had to throw all the eye candy, and that was absolutely not really, didn't help the story per se. I mean, it's not, there are better stories out there, I would say.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think visually it was a lovely movie. There's a lot of the visuals that I loved.
Yeah.
A lot of the weird little effects and lighting and some of the sets and this and that. I mean, I do have to say I loved the Lucy when she rose from the dead, all in white, and just the costumes were gorgeous. Intense, right? Gorgeous. But overall, the movie lacked substance, I think, more than it had about the same substance as the first movie, which is it had about as much substance as your average Twinkie. There's not much there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. This is like the Easter version of the Twinkie. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's a little dressed up. Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think that it was actually more regressive because it decided to double down on a lot of these ideas that the 1931 version didn't even really go into. It just was boom, here's this, boom, here's this. And then this one decided to give each one of these points a deep, dark, intense backstory underneath all of the things. And this is why, and then think about this. And I think the real problem with this is that Dracula itself, when you boil it down to the basics, which is the 1931 version, right? Basically, Dracula, he's a vampire, needs Mina, goes to Mina, dies, right? Because he loves her or whatever, right? It is just a fundamentally flawed and old and dated story.
Sure, yes.
And so I think there's only so much that you can do within that structure unless you're really willing to go down and break down a lot of that story and to make it something new entirely. But I do think that it doubled down on so many of the things that it needed to change, and anything that it added, it really just furthered a lot of the super, super, super regressive ideas. And it's disheartening because this is the 90s. So we're still telling the same stories, and we're still reiterating more so, trying to and this is the part that I really hate. It's validating everybody's motives and everybody's actions when it's just really fucked up. And so looking at stuff like this, I'm like, man, this is why I knew so many shitty people. This is why all of this happened. Not because of this film necessarily, but because these are the things that are okay. It's okay to treat people like shit, and it's okay to be in this mindset if you've got a reason, right? And that's not good enough. We're past that point now. So, who is this for, Eric?
I'd say it was for the gothic steampunk community.
Ooh, the Wild Wild West.
Exactly. It was for folks who loved Wild Wild West. No, truly, just because, the story, again, like you were saying, exactly, it lacked all substance. It was not good, but visually gorgeous. Costumes, gorgeous. Setting, gorgeous. There was a lot about it that was, visually so appealing, like you were saying, Bob. And I think it appealed to folks who really, really identified with a lot of that sort of aesthetic. Yeah.
What about you, Bob?
I'm kind of with Eric on this one. I think that was meant to appeal to people who are easily, visibly excited and fulfilled by pure visual, not much else, right? Yeah, just all style, no substance, that kind of crowd, which kind of goes back to my statement about the 1931 movies. It was made for the unwashed masses, the rubes in some ways, Mm-hmm. And some of those with a gothic edge. Let's say the rube that appreciates the Cure in some ways.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to double down on all of that you guys said. And I think that this is for people that mistake visuals for story substance. So, you know, you can talk to people about like what they remember, like, this is so cool, blah, 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 blah. So the visuals are what stick, but like the story beats and everything are things that often are forgotten or glossed over by the stunning visuals and stuff like that. Like I can think of so many films where I'm like, oh, that's a great film. And then I go back and watch it. I'm like, oh, that's a garbage film, but damn, it was pretty.
It was pretty, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And,
it was a good right. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to 1,000% double down on that. Did you like it, Eric?
I liked how it looked. I loved Lucy. Such a redeeming character for me in this movie. Generally, no, I did not like it. I loved Lucy, loved the visuals. So I'm going to give a real half-hearted yes and no. A real Libra move. I
So
did
typical.
and did not like this movie.
What about you, Bob?
Yeah, I'm with Eric on the visuals. Visually beautiful, stunning movie. The only other redeeming factor, I think Gary Oldman is one of the best character actors of all time.
True.
His performance is great.
Truly.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, but he is purely like a character actor.
Yeah.
He's not a lead guy, right? Other than that, I don't have a lot of redeeming value. I appreciate what Eric says about the Lucy character. I almost think, too, that's got slipped in. Somehow,
Yeah.
the strength and the wonderfulness of that character like made it through the eye candy that they were trying to portray every single woman in this movie as,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I have issues. I have a lot of issues with it. I give it, you know, a big thumbs down, honestly. I have to do that.
Yeah, I think that you're right that the strength and the love that we have for Lucy is maybe they weren't expecting people to have that, especially like, you know, in today's day and age, because you're supposed to look at her and you're supposed to think less of her because she's promiscuous, you know. all
That's
this
true.
other
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So
That's
I think
very
that
true.
that was completely accidental.
Yeah.
It's
but,
perspective. It's a matter of perspective more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
That the
And
Lucy
I-
character is rad, and she is because she's free. She's actually the character with the most strength in the entire movie, almost
Yeah.
in some ways.
And I love that. I love like,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
It sucks
That's great.
because it feels like with a lot of like older film and older stories, like more often than purposeful, really great, patronizing characters. When we get a character like this version of Lucy, it's accidental, but I'll take
Yeah.
it, you know?
Yeah.
Like a happy accident.
Yeah, and this is a moment where, like, if there was a woman in the writer's room who's like, oh, this is great, they'd be like, nope, rewriting that.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Right. Yep.
On our patented scale of like it, love it, gotta have it,
Yes.
don't check. It is, it's a like it just because of Lucy and because of the visuals. Everything
Yeah.
else to me is like, it's, and Gary Oldman, right? But
Yeah.
like, I have a hard time with some of the things that I read on what and how he did things. Like, for instance, that woman that played Lucy, she was uncomfortable with like one of the scenes, the sex scene, and then Coppola had Oldman go and like whisper something into her ear and stuff like that. So there was a lot of like coaxing that was happening with these characters and with these women behind the scenes that really definitely played into, and so it's like, it's just weird because it's like, okay, cool, there's some cool things about this, but like at the same time, it's like, I'd probably like look up scenes or GIFs of this to send out before I would like go back and watch this movie.
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
100%.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do Dracula better. Like, what the fuck, y'all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us, Bob. We really,
Yeah.
Oh,
this
of course.
is a
Thanks for having
delight.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
this
you,
is
Bob.
great.
This
Great.
has been so
Yeah.
much fun.
Good fun. Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, I love talking about it. I definitely got some new perspectives and a new lack of appreciation for both of them, honestly,
Yeah.
but that's okay. I
I
always
was not
prefer to see
expecting
things.
this, and this is
I
where we
wasn't
are now.
either. I wasn't either. Yeah. Me neither. But here we are. So
Here we are. Where can people find you and the creative projects that you do?
well, the tilt wheel you can find about once every 2 years somewhere. You just got to look kind of hard. The I Want to Party with Bob podcast is on all the different podcast apps, Spotify, Apple, Google, yada, yada, just like Nostalgia is. Same thing with the great Rock and Roll Trivia podcast. Go on your favorite podcast app and search, and there I will be. So yes, indeed. Look me up, please, and enjoy yourself. I talk a lot of shit about a lot of things you might like, but I speak from a position of love, never hate, and I love to talk shit about things that I love. So
hell yeah.
That's why we love you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Bob, and thank you for listening. Please write into us at nostalgiapodcast@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, topics, things. I don't know. Tell us you love us. We like validation. And thank you to David Tercero for providing technical support, Danny Barkley for editing our podcast, and thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.